All right, welcome to our first episode of Talking Ball with Pat Leonard at Super Bowl 59 here in New Orleans on Radio Row, Table 48. Come find us. And Zack Rosenblatt from The Athletic, senior writer at The Athletic covering the Jets and the NFL, kind enough to join us and kick us off on the right foot. Zack, thanks so much for being here, man. Really appreciate it.
You got a sick setup. I'm happy to be here. Yeah.
I think I screamed into your ear when I started there, didn't I?
No, you're good.
All right, let's roll. Okay, so wanted to start with, I think you were at Super Bowl media night last night to kick everything off. Yeah. What stood out to you, because you're a great storyteller, and I think one of your great strengths, as people have seen in your work, is you can see things that other people aren't seeing, maybe identify a storyline that's kind of an undercurrent that maybe isn't obvious. Did anything jump out to you on media night, either with the Chiefs, the Eagles, or just the way this game is setting up at all?
Oh, that's a good question.
Putting you on the spot.
Well, the setup for this media night was pretty rough because they like closed off the field. Like, it's hard to like explain media night to people, but basically there's just like you're in the stadium and there's podiums where like the big guys are all talking and then everybody else is kind of wandering. But they like limited it to just the sidelines and it's like cut off from where the seats are. So there's like crowd of people, and so you have like the wanderers, like Mekhi Becton standing in a crowd. You can see him, but what I'm working on something about Carson Wentz. So it was interesting to me going to Carson Wentz, seeing all the Eagles media surrounding him, and the way he handled it well, but you could tell he was kind of like uncomfortable with it. So like just seeing his like eyes darting back and forth, and answering all these questions about Jalen Hurts and the team that got rid of him and how he's landed in this moment, I thought that was fascinating. But like I would say, and for the sake of your pod and the team you cover, like seeing Saquon like in his element was pretty cool. It's like he was enjoying himself. I would say.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you that. How did he come across? Because
he had too big of a crowd to like watch a lot of it. He maybe had the biggest podium crowd of the night, like him and Mahomes and Kelsey. I would say had like the biggest ones. But I think he was having a blast. I mean, somebody was telling me that he was like funny, and people asked the question, like you asked the question, like. Wow. And it's just like laughing, having a great time. Like I think he, as you know, if you've been to these, like every year he would come to Radio Row and he'd be bouncing around promoting something, and like you don't want to be the guy that's doing that ultimately, because that means you're not in the game, or you're in this case rarely in the playoffs before this. So I think he's really embracing this moment, and I think that's really cool. It's gonna be fun to see how he looks during that game, because he's had one hell of a season, obviously, and the playoffs, like I keep thinking about how that play he had where he hit himself in the helmet twice as he's running down the field after blood. Like, that's going to be like the image of the Eagles season, I feel like, if they win the Super Bowl. So.
No doubt. It's like one of those moments where a guy is having an out-of-body experience and is feeling himself.
I've really never seen a guy do that either. Like, I can't think of it. I remember seeing anybody hit their helmet as they're like going on a long run because they're so excited they can't contain it.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's almost like the equivalent of the guys tapping their foreheads when they hit a big three in the NBA or something like that. But it's nothing you see in the NFL, especially because, like you said, when are you going to have the time to do that?
Yeah, you don't have time to do that during a play. Like, the play's not over yet, technically.
I thought it was interesting. He said, too, he made that comment that New York needs a quarterback to Jameis Winston. And then I saw everybody say, oh, Saquon's throwing more shade at New York. And he came out on Twitter and said, stop making it this New York, banging on New York is old. Like, let's not make it that. I found that interesting because, I think you and I and people in New York know that even if he's not going to make it too public, he doesn't mind twisting the needle every now and then.
Yes.
But I think, like, when I talked to him after they beat the Giants at MetLife Stadium, he kind of said, I'm finally an Eagle now after that game. It's kind of like, yes, I have harbored this a little bit. And I feel like
I took it all out on him that day. And then,
very much.
Yeah. And I mean, that's why you kind of knew this was going to happen with the way the Eagles are playing. If they kept winning, you just knew like it was going to keep coming up and keep coming up. And John Mayer is not sleeping well right now, and Joe Shane is hearing the brunt of it. But it happens with the Jets all the time. I think more than the Giants, but like a guy that just left having this huge moment on a national stage, like it happens constantly. Last year, Nicole Harmon gets the game-winning Super Bowl touchdown when they couldn't even find a way to use him last year. Mekhi Becton is having the time of his life. Like there's all these examples of the Jets, and now you see Saquon one was so public because of the Hard Knocks thing. Like, it's so unique that he doesn't need to say anything anymore to his credit. Like, he can say the stuff he said. Anytime he does anything, it gets rubbed in the Giants' face. Like, you He doesn't need to say a word. If he scores a touchdown, it's like, Joe Shane.
No doubt, no doubt.
Yeah.
We're brought to you here at Radio Row at Super Bowl in New Orleans by MyBookie, Boom Chaga, Sal Loretta, and Estate 98 Coffee. Thank you to our sponsors for getting us right for this championship game between the Eagles and the Chiefs. So you mentioned the Jets. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the team that you're closest to right now. And just broad question, what do you think of the Aaron Glenn hire to succeed Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich, I guess, and to try to get the Jets back on the right track?
Yeah, I think he is exactly what they need. And he hit all the introductory press conferences are stupid and don't really actually mean anything. Like we saw, like Joe Judge, everybody, the Giants fans loved his, and they turned on him after, they loved him after the first year, and then it turned pretty quick. Yeah. But they've needed just like an adult in the room who's going to be the one to hold people accountable. Like Robert Saleh's whole thing, and I think he aged a little bit better as time passed, but I still don't think he ultimately was like the leader this team needed. His whole thing was like letting the players lead themselves and hold each other accountable. That works when you're winning, but like when you're not, you need somebody who's going to stand in front of the room and be like, hey, "You're not doing your job. If you don't pick your shit up,
yeah,
you're going to get benched." Like things like that. They were just letting a lot too much fly, and so he hits all those points. I think the fact that he played for the Jets, it means a little something extra to him. That once the game start, fans will turn on him quick if they lose. Like the fact that he's a beloved former Jet, like that doesn't really last. That's not long lasting unless you're winning. But I think the most interesting thing to me about the whole Aaron Glenn thing, though, is like it's pretty clearly his show. Like he's running things. I think he's a big reason they picked that GM. If you saw this press conference, like it was, I mean, he was the star of the show there. But like it was a lot of like their partners. We're doing it's we, not I. We're gonna make every decision together. We're both reporting Woody. So I think the fact that Aaron is getting this maybe carte blanche is not the right word, but he's like pretty much getting to build the team in his image. Like that's fascinating for a first-time head coach. You don't really see that.
It is, yeah, and that Parcells blessing, obviously,
that helps. Yeah,
a big part of that. So yeah, you're describing essentially an organization that it's funny because they have a lot of talent on their roster, but you're describing an organization that it sounds like what you're saying is they recognized the need for a cultural foundation to be reconstructed, like underneath all of that.
Yeah.
So it's less about who can augment our players and more like, can we just run like a competent operation behind the scenes so they can thrive?
Yeah, because I think removing all the press conference stuff, just looking at what Aaron Glenn did last season, the Lions or guys are dropping like flies in that defense.
Yeah.
Like week after he's starting Jamal Adams off the street and then cutting him the week later. Like they're all these guys coming off the street, their defense still finishes top 10. The Jets, when they've hit adversity in their history, but like especially in recent years, they tend to crumble. Like Garrett Wilson said something last year. He was like, "It's in our DNA. It's like we are like waiting for something bad to happen even when we're winning." So that's why they had like 5 or 6 leads in the fourth quarter and lost all of those games. And so, like, which is hard to, like, they lost in ways that I've never seen this last year, which is why, like, that's so clearly like a coaching and culture thing. If you're going into the fourth quarter with leads, that means you're good enough to win those games.
Yeah.
But they're not maintaining them because they do the same mistakes. They get dumb penalties, whatever it is. So they just need somebody who is not going to crumble when adversity strikes. And the biggest question hanging over all this is, let's say they don't have an amazing first season. Like, is Woody Johnson, is he still going to step back and let them run the show, or is he going to keep getting impatient because that would be 15 years without the playoffs? So I think that's the big question for me is like everything in theory sounds good right now. Woody says I need to look in the mirror, which you never heard him say something like that before. And he's given the keys to a GM and a coach, both first time. So we don't really know what they're going to be, but in theory, he's letting them be who they're going to be on their own. But in this offseason, I think he will. But like when the season starts and if the noise gets loud, like is he going to revert back to form? And if he doesn't, they're not going to go anywhere. It's going to be the cycle repeat.
You may have answered this question already then with the culture emphasis, but I had heard that it's public knowledge that Arthur Smith interviewed for the job, but I had heard that he was pretty close to, like, he didn't get the job, but let's say if Aaron Glenn didn't get it, it very well could have been Arthur Smith. I don't know if Glenn's going to work out better than Smith would have, but if I were a Jet fan, that would have excited me more in the short term than Glenn. Like, I feel like Glenn is encouraging for long-term stability, maybe. Yeah, like Arthur Smith to me seems like more of the, twist the knobs on the offense guy. Maybe hire a really good defensive coordinator underneath you to run the defense. That would have excited me more. I don't know. How do you view that? Like, for what this Jets team needs, being in the locker room.
It's funny you say that because I think he was the number one candidate in terms of the one the fans wanted the least. I would say they were ready to riot because I'd heard what you heard that he was really high thought of. They interviewed him. I can't remember. I think it was the Salo process, and they really liked him back then, and they liked him again this time. And I thought he would do well in the room, which was a big thing. Like they wanted somebody to win them over, and that's what Aaron Glenn did. But yeah, It just kind of depends on like if you're willing to take a risk with the first time head coach or not. He obviously wasn't very successful in Atlanta. Ultimately, he didn't have a quarterback, which is kind of tied to a lot of coaches who didn't have success. I'm higher on him than I think Jets fans are. I do think he would be fine as the coach, and I think he's someone who is going to hold people accountable and all that kind of stuff. But it would have been interesting to see if they decided they didn't want Glenn or they didn't go for him. Like Mike Vrabel was their number one target ultimately. Like they can talk about like Aaron Glenn has been the number one more time. He wasn't. If Mike Vrabel says I'll coach for you, they would have given him everything he wanted. But the Patriots opened up and he took that. And so Glenn became the next top one. But to their credit, they did the due diligence. They talked to so many coaches, so many GMs, did the research with 3013, and they landed on Glenn. But yeah, I think Arthur Smith was, if they were going to do a series of second interviews, I think he would have been one.
One thing that concerns me about Glenn football-wise is he's only had a top 20 scoring defense once in 4 years. And I know he didn't have the players in Detroit that he has now in New York. And I know he didn't even have the players in Detroit in the first 2 years that he had the last 2 years. I just look at that and I say, culture's great and necessary, but like, what's the brass tacks that you're actually getting when the game start? I'm glad you mentioned Vrabel because that was actually my next question. You did a story, worked on a story, did a lot of research, great reporting and writing on Mike Vrabel, who ends up taking the Patriots job. Wanted to take us behind the scenes a little bit on how that came together, because I thought it was a really fascinating look behind the curtain at a guy who I think most people look at him and just, hey, he's a hard-ass football coach, whatever. Seems like there's a lot more to him. And also, being in the business myself, didn't seem like an easy story to get to be honest. So could you take us behind the curtain a little bit?
Well, to your point, like the thing you just said is what always fascinates me about, like when people have a very specific perception of somebody, I try to like dig into, like talk to people that know them and dig into their background and find out like what are the people who know them the best, like what do they say about this perception of this person. And when he got fired by the Titans, which I think shocked everybody, that there's an added layer of that, because I think he's pretty universally agreed that he's one of the better coaches in the NFL.
Shocked him too.
Yeah, shocked him to a degree. But yeah, so I had this idea in my head of nobody's really like, I kind of thought of the Mike McCarthy thing, like when he took that year off, he had that whole BS like thing on NFL Network where he's like, I learned all about analytics, and then he admitted later that he lied. But like the idea of like getting access to somebody as they're trying to find their way back to becoming a head coach, like, and then I think I had the idea before he even took the Browns thing, and then that added another element of, okay, so what is he learning from the Browns? What did he learn from his Titans experience? What is he looking for in the future? And then we had like a mutual connection, and I pitched this idea to them, and they brought it to him. He was interested, and we did like an initial sort of like meet and greet, get to know you, size me up, where I flew to Nashville. Went to like this bar, this dive bar that he loves with his golf buddies. I walk in, they're all there. They're already been drinking a few Michelob Ultras and Miller Lights.
Love it. After a round?
Yeah, they just golfed. They went right to this bar because that's what they always do. These are like his golf buddies he met when he first started coaching in Nashville. He brings them everywhere.
Oh, they're not in the business?
No, they're not at all, which is why he loves them, because there's these like Southern dudes who just drink a bunch and golf together. And like he brought them to like the award NFL honors when he won Coach of the Year. He brought them to his Patriots Ring of Honor thing. Like they're like his buddies. They're like his drinking buddies. So I walk in and I think it helped that they were all there. Like it didn't feel like too big. You sit down and and he's kind of sizing me up. He's asking me questions about me and my life. Like the first 30 minutes of him just like asking me completely about me. Like, tell me about your fiance. Where where are you from? Who's your mentor in the business? Like blah blah blah, all this stuff. And then as time goes on, like we're definitely like getting along, and we have a good vibe. And,
he was waiting to see what you were going to order to drink.
Yeah, I had some Bud Lights. Yeah, gotta have some cheap beer around Mike Vrabel. And then
no Merlot around Mike Vrabel. Yeah.
And then the next morning we got on the phone, and he was like, "All right, so tell me what your idea is. Like, what do you want out of me if you do this?" And I explained to him, like, so originally the plan with the Browns was during games he wouldn't actually be at the game. He'd be like in his house watching on the computer and like breaking down film or whatever. And then that eventually changed, and he was just on the sideline. But I was like if you're down, like I'd love to fly out to Nashville when you're out here and sit with you, and come out to Cleveland and watch a game on Sunday with you, and all this and this. Like if you're willing to do it, and pitching all this because you never know. I doubt. Yeah. People like that don't get that level of access. And he's like, yeah, that sounds good. Let's do it. Yeah, just let me know when you want to check with me on my schedule and all this stuff. And yeah, then it would just work out. So one time I flew out to Nashville and I flew out to Cleveland. We do this routine where our initial hangout / meetup, we kind of be not off the record, but just kind of like shooting the breeze, background, getting a beer. And then the next day we'd get on the phone and talk for however long, and I'd ask whatever questions I needed. So each session we covered different things. And yeah, then it came together in an amazing way. And then the end of the season comes, and the Jets are a disaster, and I have to write all these stories about their dysfunction. So I I wanted to get it done by a certain point, and I wasn't able to even start writing on it because I had to work on our thing that we did. I did with Diana and Silver, and then I was scrambling because I really wanted it to come out before the end of the season, before he started doing all his interviews, because the idea was this is what these teams are getting, and so we were able to finally publish it. We published the day, and I didn't know this when we planned this day. They published the day that the Jets interviewed him, so it was great timing for me. I was able to make it and tie it to the Jets, so the fans didn't yell, "Why aren't you writing about the Jets?" Right.
Yeah. No, fantastic work. Story should win an award.
Oh, thanks.
Really, really good job. And yeah, it really comes across, like you said, hey, hopefully Glenn works out, but comes across that this is a guy that, almost every team in the league would love to be their coach, that leads a room.
Yeah,
right. That relates to the players.
And I relate everything back to the Jets because I cover them. His accountability goes to the degree that he'd wake up, go to the facility and work out at 5 a.m, and then he'd just hang out by the training room to make sure everybody showed up on time. That's he'd wait there, and when they didn't, he would call them and be like, "Hey, I hope you're having a good morning." And it's that kind of stuff. And he is the hard ass that he's portrayed as, but he's not only that. He'll grill you in front of the team, and then he'll also ask you about your family, and he'll know your kids' names and stuff like that. So that's why I think he's just a great leader, and he's exactly what the Jets needed. And I think Glenn, to a degree, is that too, but he just doesn't have the same experience, and we don't know what he's going to do. What his defense is going to look like, what his offense is going to look like, all that stuff.
Yeah, you're definitely hitting on, despite being a first timer, the hope is you're getting some of those qualities and traits in Glenn that Vrabel would have brought.
Exactly.
And that was kind of the priority of the search, even though the interview was 40 people.
Yeah.
Whatever it was.
It was wild, yeah.
Did you have a problem with that or no? From a process standpoint?
I did have a problem with it. At a certain point, it was all right, guys, let's get to the second interviews. But when you hear more about the process, they were being very thorough. And I think some people made fun of them because they did this narrow process and they landed on the guy they were going to hire anyway. But I actually think that's not a bad thing necessarily. You're doing the research. I think the list was pretty underwhelming. If you look top to bottom, the guys they talked to, but
right, you could look and say they were interested in talking to this guy, but he wasn't actually.
It was clear what they they weren't. Everybody wanted them to, not everybody, but a lot of people wanted to prioritize offensive-minded coaches. They didn't. They have to prioritize people who were head coaches before, or that I think that they viewed as people who were leaders who could change things. So there's a lot of defensive coaches there are. A lot of former head coaches like Vance Joseph, names that aren't exciting, but they've done it before. That's kind of what they're looking at.
Yeah, I know. When I looked at it at first, I thought to myself, it's almost as when I go to a diner and I look at the 8-page menu, and if I don't order something right away, it's because I don't know what I'm looking for. And at first, that's what I thought the Jets were doing. It's they don't even know what they're looking for. Yeah. But you're telling me they did the qualities they did, and they found a candidate who had those qualities. All right, some more rapid fire Jets questions, kind of player questions related to what's going to happen with this roster, because they really are a fascinating team right now.
Yeah,
dysfunction, like you said, but now really fascinating because they're so talented. Wanted to start with DJ Reed, the corner who's going into free agency. Looks like he's trying to get paid, so probably isn't going to come back. So my question is, Where does he end up in your mind? I know it's early, but so obviously Ulbrich goes to the Falcons. You got teams like the Ravens, Bills, Packers who could use a corner, all good teams. Saleh now goes over to the Niners. And then even Marquand Manuel, safeties coach from the Jets, now comes over to the Giants, who desperately need a corner. Could Reed be that number one? I'm wondering what you think he ends up prioritizing. And of that list, or did I not name a team, where does he end up?
I think it's going to be simple. I think he's going to go to the highest bidder. I think he was pretty open in a way that you don't really see guys like in the middle of their free agent season, like saying that he just wants to get his bag. Like, the Jets weren't negotiating with him, so he kind of like had been assuming they wouldn't want him back. But if Aaron Glenn wants him back, maybe that'll change. But yeah, I think he's going to seek the most money he can get, and he's someone who I think he's only 28 or 29. He's kind of a late bloomer. Like, he had to fight his way to like becoming a starter and stuff like that. So he's still got like room to grow. I don't know if he should be like your number one shutdown type corner. I think he's very good. I think he's probably best as like a very good number two. But I don't know specific teams. I mean, I think going where Ulbrich is makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I don't think it's so much the team or the fit, frankly, as much as he wants to get a chance to get paid.
Honestly, and I don't know DJ at all, but sometimes that results in guys going to like a tax-free state. Like going to the Raiders. Or going to the Jaguars, or going to the Cowboys, whatever it is. That's interesting. It does not bode well for the Giants. I would say that.
Yeah.
But the Giants do have cap space and a desperate need, so they can end up overpaying a player like that.
Old Dave Gettleman special, right?
That's right. That's right. The Nate Solder special. So Garrett Wilson will he be on the Jets next season?
I think he will. I'm curious to see what he thinks of the new staff, this offensive staff. They did bring back Sean Jefferson, the receivers coach, who I think he had a good relationship with.
Okay.
What they do at quarterback is probably the biggest indicator of like how excited it'll be. But ultimately, money will talk, and I would hope / assume that the Jets are going to prioritize him, and so give him the contract, make him one of the highest paid receivers because he deserves it, and then he'll be here. I mean, maybe that's not like a forever thing because these guys change their mind on a limb pretty quickly these days, but I think he's going to be a Jet this year, but I do know there's frustration. I know there definitely was during the season. He's had 3 years with inconsistent quarterback play with all this drama, so many offensive coordinators. I think 3 different receivers coaches. It's the first time he's going to have a receivers coach for 2 straight years.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he had a different one each of his first 3 years.
And produced that.
And he's produced that way with all the turmoil and all that. So, and I think he's made of the right stuff.
Seems like an accountable guy.
Yeah, he is. Like, he definitely is an emotional guy, and I could see maybe some people not like loving how he always like shares what he's thinking or whatever. But I think he's a guy you build around. So I think / hope that they will build around him. But he might be waiting to see what happens with the quarterback, whether he wants to play with Aaron Rodgers or whoever is the quarterback.
Leads me to the big one. Is Aaron Rodgers going to be the quarterback? And it sounds, Zach, like, and you know more about this than I do, it sounds like people are expecting this decision to be made soon. Like that it's not like, oh, this is going to drift towards like past the combine, towards the start of free agency. Like this is going to be something that the GM and Aaron Glenn are going to sit back and say yes or no in the next couple of weeks. So you tell me, like, are they going to find a way to move on there? Or
yeah, that's the hardest one to get a read on because I think both sides have kind of kept it pretty close to the vest what they want to do. Like, I don't think anybody knows what Aaron Rodgers thinks of who they hired. I think he might look at it as first-time head coach, first-time offensive coordinator, Tanner Angstrom, who he has no ties to, quarterbacks coach, Charles London, who he has no ties to, first-time GM. So I think there's a lot of factors there, but also there's the factor of how confident is he that another team will want him. So there's a lot up in the air. I still lean towards him not coming back and thinking that they shouldn't bring him back just because, I've seen a lot of Jets fans talk themselves into the fact that, like, who's better out there. And look, and like comparing his stats to other guys. I don't think the stats are an accurate depiction of how last season went. I think for the most part, he was pretty average. He had some really good games. He had some very bad games. And then you get all that comes along with Aaron Rodgers. He needs to call the plays himself. He goes on Pat McAfee every week. Like I think Aaron Glenn and them, maybe they'd be open to coming back if they'd be like, look, we're happy to bring you back. But you need to know, like, it's going to be our offense. You got to learn it and run it. And you have to stop causing drama off the scenes by saying crazy stuff on Pat McAfee if you're going to go on that show. Or again, if he abides by all that, maybe. But I don't know that he's going to want to change his ways at 42 years old. So that's why I still lean towards him not coming back. I could see it happening. Like if the Jets are really committed to trying to win right now, which I think would be misguided, like going all in on winning this year. I don't think Aaron Rodgers' ceiling with him is like making the playoffs. I don't think they're going on a run. So is it worth going all in on him again? If that's the ceiling, I don't think so. So I lean towards him not coming back, but I do think there is a shot.
As you lay that out, it sounds incongruent that he would be back given the priorities of the Aaron Glenn hire.
Exactly.
Right?
But I thought it was very notable, and I think, honestly, the smartest / best thing Aaron Glenn did at his press conferences where, I mean, he came in knowing everybody was going to ask about it. He addressed it head on during his opening statement. He's like, I know you guys are about to ask about this. We're going to talk to him. And then as he kept getting pressed on, he's like, guys, this is not about Aaron Rodgers. Like, we're going to evaluate everybody on the roster the same way. Like, no one person's above the team. Essentially, that's the message that's been missing. I think they've let him in particular, but even in general, like stars kind of like the way things were going to be for themselves with the Jets. And you just can't do that anymore. It was always about look. They were always sucking up to him in the press conferences and all that stuff. And I get it because he's Aaron Rodgers and you needed to convince him to come to the Jets. They've never had a good quarterback in a long, long time. Like I don't blame them for getting him or anything like that. But I just think he needs to be clear that like this isn't your team, it's the Jets.
I would actually be interested in seeing him go somewhere else for one last ride that's a better team and see if he can put the ego aside, because it's got to be as somebody who clearly, on certain days or often ends up looking like or seeming like a me guy, or the story ends up about him, even if he's not. If he were on a competitive winning team and there was less drama around, maybe the focus could end up more on the football and on the team and less on him. Around the Jets, who are still not, they're still building things.
Yeah.
I think there's still too many stories and conversations happening that aren't about the game and the result. Not to mention that, like you said, it's not like he played great and it's like, well, we clearly have to bring him back because of how good he was. That doesn't even exist. So that my point there leads me to follow up is, I don't know if you listen to the GM Shuffle at all. Like Michael Lombardi used to be on there. Now it's Mark Dominic. And Mark Dominic said something on the last podcast kind of out of nowhere. He said that if the Jets moved on from Aaron Rodgers, he thought Rodgers could end up a fit in LA with the Rams.
I was going to say that.
If Stafford doesn't come back to Los Angeles, that makes sense to you?
Yes. I think that Aaron has always had his eye on going back out west because that's his home. He has a house in Malibu. And I think he has a lot of respect for Sean McVay. Would he be willing to? I mean, if there's a coach that he's going to be willing to see control it to, maybe that would be the one. I mean, the interesting factor there is Matt LaFleur's brother is on that staff, so and I don't know that he had the best. I mean, he talks about they were friends, but they were definitely friends. But yeah, I think that's a fascinating one because that definitely, especially when the Matt Stafford the way the news is reported that he's going to play, but they still need to work some things out and making it clear that maybe he's not 100% the Rams.
And now they're going to trade Cooper Kupp.
And they're trading Cooper Kupp.
It's like his best friend on the team.
Yes, that's a great point. I'd be fascinated at Matt Stafford's market because I think he's better than Aaron Rodgers right now, just as a pure quarterback.
100%.
So I'd be fascinated to see. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford swap would be fun for everybody, frankly. But I don't know if Stafford would want to come to the Jets, but
right. It's a shame for the Giants' sake. I mean, they got a drafted quarterback, but it's a shame Stafford's not a few years younger and going through this.
So you can justify.
Then you'd have to go all in.
I mean, but could you see? I mean, I don't know what Joe Shane pitched to John Mara, but can you see him just trying to go all in on this year? Though?
Yes. Though I'm a little bit skeptical that Shane is on the same hot seat that Dable is.
Yeah, I mean, based on all the reports getting leaked out about, they're not on the same timeline.
And I also correct. Yeah, right. Good point. No, also too. Yeah, there were all the leaks, and then when Mara had that press conference, he said, the roster isn't that much better and things like that. But when he talked about we had a meeting and they convinced me XYZ, the only person he mentioned having to change things, who was kind of fighting for himself, was Dable. And then his comment about Joe Shane was just a blanket, I like his process. I've never seen us draft like this, because it's a shinier, nicer, more technology-based draft team. Obviously, coming off Dave, that was inevitable and impossible not to do.
Yeah. By the way, not to get too off track here, but
no, that's fine.
them bringing back Shane and Daboll has. I was thinking about this yesterday because I knew I was coming on your pod. Like, the Giants fans are starting to sound like Jets fans in the way they are just like angry, but it seems like they've turned on them in a way that I've never seen before. Where I think Giants fans historically, like as reporters, if you criticize them, it's like, how dare you criticize the Giants? Whether it's now, it's like, fire Joe Shane. We hate that he's back. Like, he says, like, he had a bunch of interviews at the Senior Bowl, and it's all the fans have completely turned on him in a way that happens frequently with the Jets. And so I feel like they bear a better hope this works, because I think it could get really, really ugly real fast.
I think the reason for that, even though there's all the losing and everything, it's two-pronged. There are the players, like the Nick McLeod story, the Saquon Barkley situation, and clearly the players, there's a disconnect between them and Joe Shane. I think, though, it's, you know this very well, Zach, as much as you report out these stories, and there are plenty of fans and listeners and viewers who appreciate what we do and they believe it when they see it in print. There are a lot of people who they just need to see it for themselves. And Hard Knocks is what that was. Like, that is what, and so for some people, they acted like that's the first time they saw it. Some people, it kind of validated maybe something they saw in one of our stories, I think, that they were skeptical about, or that raised their eyebrow. But I really think, and this is why we're probably never seeing that again, but it really, you know,
it's going to age like so insanely. Like, you're going to look, when you write a book about the Giants 10 years from now, like writing about like that era of the Giants is just going to be like, man, I can't believe they put that stuff on Hard Knocks.
The fact that you think the Giants of right now are worthy of a book is
about their dysfunction.
That's technically praise of the Giants, considering where they're at right now. All right, last Jets question, and then we'll do some quick fun segments to wrap up. Thank you so much for being here on Talking Ball with Pat Leonard here on the Believe Network, sponsored by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink. Sal Loretta for men over in Midland Park, New Jersey. Check that out. Wearing my Sal Loretta fit right now. And we're brought to you by My Bookie and Estate 98 Coffee. All right, so the last Jets question, and this ties into a lot, is the NFL draft. What do they do at number 7? Let me ask you like this. If Rodgers is gone, are they drafting a quarterback there? I know it's not a strong quarterback class. It's the same questions about the Giants. What do you think in general? Give me like 3 positions or so that you think need to be priorities there for them.
I mean, it really is a cliche of they should pick whoever is the best player on the board, whether that, because I think you can make an argument they have a hole almost everywhere. Like a hole. Like that, I think the offensive line is as good as it's been in a long time, but they don't have the right tackle. So like, I can see the draft a little complicated, or a defensive tackle. They need someone next to Quentin Williams. They need a corner because DJ Reed's gone. Need a receiver if you're going to get rid of Devontae Adams. So like, you can make a case for each of those positions. There's elite guys there, but I in the back of my head, I keep thinking about how the Broncos last year with Darren Muji, the new GM on the staff, drafted Bo Nix way higher than anybody thought, and it worked out, obviously. Like, not to say there's a Bo Nix in this class. Like, so is there a quarterback like Jackson Dart or somebody like that who's not on the level of Shador Sanders and Cam Ward, who could be like, I know that nobody grades him maybe as high as we do, but like, we believe in this kid. Let's go and get him or something like I can see that maybe. Like, if there's a quarterback that, you know, against all consensus, you know, this is the guy I like. I mean, that's a lot of times how you don't land on a Bo Nix, you land on like a Daniel Jones. But
I'm glad you said Muji's name, by the way, because I was waiting for you to say it.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to pronounce it.
For a while I was calling him Moogie, and I found out it was Muji, like you pronounce the G. So
filed away.
But yeah, so that's where I'm at with the draft.
All right, so time for our segment sponsored by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink. It is natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. The segment is called Here Comes the Boom. So this is to ask you, not for a game prediction yet, but just an impact player you feel like is going to make a boom of an impact on this Super Bowl that is not obvious to the naked eye, right? We know Saquon Barkley, Patrick Mahomes, Kelsey, Jalen Hurts are going to be big factors. Who do you think kind of steps up and impacts this that's a little bit more off the radar than the obvious?
Let's say the one that just jumped to my mind is Nolan Smith, the edge rusher for the Eagles. He's had a really good playoffs. I think he has like 5 sacks in the playoffs. The way to beat the Chiefs is you get pressure on Patrick Mahomes. Their offensive line is very good, but Nolan Smith is one that I'm very interested to see if he can make an impact. Because if you get pressure on Mahomes and force some turnovers, then you have a shot. And the flip side for the Chiefs, the name that jumps to mind is DeAndre Hopkins. First time on this big stage. I think him and Mahomes their chemistry has grown a bit. And, if they can make some big plays on offense, then the Eagles could be in trouble. So there's so much talent in this game, so it's hard to find ones under the radar. But I think those are the ones that just now.
No, I like it. Honestly, I hadn't even been thinking about that with first time Hopkins has been here. That's a great point. A guy who I've never seen a receiver drop fewer passes that are contested than him. And his list of quarterbacks, you see all these receivers complain about the quarterbacks they play with. His list of quarterbacks in Houston is something else. I love the point about Nolan Smith too, because he might even be just a little bit more fresh if Brandon Graham plays, 10 snaps or whatever it is. So they might be able to rest him a little bit, kick him back in the fourth quarter for a key down. I love that pick. All right, next brought to you by Sal Loretta for men's clothing wear. This is called the Look Good, Play Good segment. So this could either be, I was going to ask you who is the best dressed Jet. You could still give me that, when they're walking in for their games every Sunday. But I also recognize you just came off of Super Bowl media night, where some people are really flashy, maybe looking ridiculous, maybe with a costume, maybe a mascot walking around. So somebody who looked good and played good, either on Super Bowl media night or just a Jet this season, where you would see them come in and say, this guy's always game ready.
Man, I'm blanking on the Quincy Williams always had interesting outfits. I would say he's the one that jumps to my mind immediately. In terms of, I saw somebody dressed up. I think he worked for Make-A-Wish Foundation, so I think there was a reason why. But I think he was dressed up like a genie yesterday.
Wow.
But the weird part was that when I go back to the media room, I see this guy's taking off his outfit and at his seat, in the media room, and I'm like, oh, okay, he's got a guy getting naked next to me. But
you're you need to stay in costume, man. Stay in character.
Exactly. I'm curious to see what Jalen Hurts is going to wear, because he's very fashion forward, I would say. So and Travis Kelce always wears interesting outfits too. So I'd say that those two guys. It'd be interesting to see on Super Bowl Sunday what they wear.
Good call. Yeah, it's a shame Mac Hollins didn't get to the Super Bowl with the Bills.
Oh, man.
That animal outfit he had on.
Dude, I covered him when he was with the Eagles, when he was a rookie. And he was. I wrote a story back then about how interesting of a guy. He had a pet snake, and he had all this interesting stuff. He walks around barefoot. He would ride his scooter to the Eagles facility.
I love it. He has a very active TikTok.
Yeah, because he does educational stuff or whatever, right?
Yeah, he does stuff around the house. He'll teach you.
Yeah.
I guess he'll get a vacuum cleaner and be here's the quickest way to vacuum your apartment. You have 5 minutes or whatever. He's awesome.
Yeah, he's a character, man.
All right, final question. This is Pat's pick, brought to you by MyBookie. So go to mybookie.ag, use the promo code Pat's Picks, and you'll get 50% off your first deposit of $50 more, all the way up to $1,000. We're going to put you on the spot, Zach. I want you to give me – you don't have to give me a final score if you don't want, but who wins the Super Bowl and why? And if you want to drop the score and put it on the table, go right ahead.
I think it's going to be a right down to the wire, amazing game. I think it's going to be really, really good. In my head, I have Eagles 24, Chiefs 23, right 1 point. The Eagles ultimately.
Oh, and the under hitting there, 47. Oh man.
Oh, is that the over?
It's 48 and a half.
Oh, there you go.
So yeah, that's a lot of people losing bets on that one.
Because both defenses are pretty good, so I don't see it being a huge scoring game. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think at the end of the day, the Eagles are definitely a more talented team. I think top to bottom, their roster is unreal. They have the Saquon factor. Jalen Hurts is ultimately the X factor, how he plays, how he throws the ball. And you have to factor in the Mahomes thing, but I just think if something feels different about this Eagles team than even the one from 2 years ago, it just feels like they have a little something. And Saquon's a big reason for that, honestly. The defense is playing at a really, really high level right now. Getting Brandon Graham back, emotional leader. So Nick Sirianni and Hurts are the X factors because if you're looking Nick Sirianni, Hurts versus Patrick Mahomes, Reed, you pick the Chiefs side every time, and usually the team with the best coach and quarterback wins. So I'm hesitant to pick the Eagles, but it just feels like they're the right team to knock the dynasty off the street.
I love it. Eagles in a tight one. So reminder, brought to you by MyBookie. Also, Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink. There's a QR code on your screen. You click that or go to boomchaga.com. Start feeling the difference there today. Use the code TalkingBall25 for 25% off your first order on the subscribe and save option. Also brought to you by Sal Loretta for men over in Midland Park, New Jersey. Go check that out for the finest menswear. and Estate 98 Coffee. It's estate98.com/talkingball for a steep discount on your first order over at Estate 98. He is the one and only Zack Rosenblatt, senior writer at The Athletic, covering the Jets and the NFL. And I forgot to mention this earlier, co-host of the Flight Plan podcast. So go listen to the Flight Plan as well. Zack, thanks so much for being here, man. Really appreciate it,
buddy.